space on the future
globalization,
of monetary
measurement,
policy, higher
narrative.
education, international politics, and how to fight inequality.
Yes,
But what we are most excited about is to be back. Join us at Nova SPE, Carcavelos campus.
No, but I read the last
thread. Well, the thread
yes,
tries to explain,
yes,
but
yes.
if you read it carefully, you will see that I, in a way, praise the fact that they didn't reject.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Economy Viva 2022. We'll start with the opening ceremony. And please, welcome to the stage Henrique Santos, our president of Nova Economics Club.
So, good evening, everyone. Let me begin first by warmly welcoming you all to the 7th edition of Economy Viva. It is, in fact, the 7th consecutive time that we are organizing this biggest cycle of conferences about economics that is fully organized by students in Portugal. And as the president of the Nova Economics Club and the first of the organization to have the opportunity to speak at this session, you must excuse me, but there are some people that I really need to say thanks to right away. And so I must begin, of course, by thanking to the organizing team of this year's edition, to Joana Leitão, the chief organizer of Economia Viva 2022, and also to the rest of the team, Isabel, Daniel, and Diogo. I was the chief organizer of the last edition of Economy Viva, last year's edition, so I am well aware of the work and the huge effort that is necessary to put into organizing this event. But now it's the week where we see the outcome of all those intensive months of hard work really paying off. I should also thank our co-organizers, which include Nova SBE. And today we also have the honor to have our Dean, Professor Daniel Traça, speaking just right after me. And I would also like to thank to the Nova Students' Union. These two institutions are continue having Economia Viva happening year after year. And finally, I should also thank all our partners. So firstly, the Cascais Municipality, and Marcos Pinheira, the head of future of Cascais Municipality, will also be speaking in this session right away. But I also want to thank to the European Commission representation in Portugal, to the Bank of Portugal, to Jornal Económico, to IPVJ, to Milestone, and also to Fidelidade. And again, we couldn't make it without you, so thank you very much for all your support and your belief also in the importance of this event. So, having said this, please allow me to leave you with a few more words on the history and the legacy of this exciting week of economic discussion happening in our campus starting from today. So, the Nova Economics Club, which organizes this event, was founded in 2012 by a group of 11 Masters in Economics students here at Nova SBE. So, in fact, this year, 2022, is our club's 10th anniversary, which is a very special remark, which we will begin celebrating with this outstanding week of economic discussion. So NEC was in fact initially created with the purpose of aiding the Portuguese Ministry of Finance with economic projections during the economic adjustment during the economic adjustment program that Portugal went through. And in those difficult times in the history of our country, NEC really emerged as an opportunity to involve the brightest pioneering minds in economics, which are us, students, to help policymakers achieving the best policy decisions. Nowadays, at NEC, we still have an immense know-how and skill level that we daily put at the service of our global community. And this is done by producing several economic research projects every semester that aim at providing insightful conclusions and policy recommendations on the most varied topics of economic research. And at NEC, this idea to create an annual cycle of however, it was only in the year 2016 that it was finally put into practice when the Nova Economics Club suggested this idea to organize Economia Viva to the Nova Students' Union. Discussion with relevance, European and international level, promoting an open dialogue to all society and supported also by well-known economists from all around the world. Economia Viva is in fact the biggest cycle of conferences about economics organized by students in Portugal, but it is much more than that. It is a place for discussion, it is a place for learning, it is a place for understanding. It is a place where the most pressing issues are talked about and where the solutions and insights discussed today will be a valuable contribution to the creation of the public policies of tomorrow. And in this 7th edition, we bring you economists, politicians, scientists, to sit together to discuss monetary policy, which is the debate we are having today, but also to discuss European integration, to discuss higher education, inequality, and also international politics. And this is in fact why we say that in fact, economy is, as we say, economics for all. So 1 year ago, we were in the middle of a strong wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we at NEC and at the organizing team of Economia Viva had to decide what to do with Economia Viva 2021. Events were being cancelled or postponed, classes were even happening online, so what to do? And in fact, the answer was simple: adapting. For the first time, we organized a full online event, a full online edition of Economia Viva that reached more than 2,000 people throughout the week. It was not the event we wished for sure, but it was an amazing week of economic discussion that respected and continued the legacy of Economia Viva, not allowing that this virus would stop us from organizing our conference. There is a famous quote by Vivian Green, I don't know if you ever heard it or not, but I believe it applies perfectly to this situation and to this need to keep always adapting and carrying on. And the quote goes like this: life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It is about learning how to dance in the rain. And I think this is quite interesting to think about. And so, to finish, last year when I was giving my online closer speech of the 6th edition of Economia Viva, I ended saying the following words. We will be back next year, stronger and better, and hopefully finally all together at our Nova SBE Carcavelos campus. Looking at the great debates and panelists we are having, looking at this amazing atmosphere we are living at our campus, thanks to this wonderful organizing team and to all our partners, I think we can already say mission accomplished. So thank you very much for your time and welcome to Economia Viva 2022.
Thank you very much, Henrique. And now, please welcome to the stage the Dean of Nova School of Business and Economics, Daniel Traça.
Thank you, Henrique, for these very inspiring words. I think that we have students like you that can speak this way is a great testament, not just for this school, but for this country. And so thank you for a great speech. This is probably the 7th Economia Viva that I inaugurate. And every year, what brings me here is tremendous pride. I've been at this school for 13 years, and every year I am prouder and prouder of the students that come here, of what they do, of what they achieve than the year before. And this is just another year where I feel exactly the same. And so let me talk about, I think, 4 things that matter when you think about Economia Viva. I mean, and the first one is, of course, just to say that, you know, it's so much better to be here live. And if those of you that are at home, I told them that they should actually make you come here, because it's here on campus, exchanging views with other people and sitting here in these chairs and on this campus that you're going to make it much more productive. So I hope that tomorrow we can have fewer people on video and more people sitting on campus. The second, but in terms of what Economia Viva means, I think it means the faith that I personally have. And I'd like to mention this to all those that have organized this, to Nova SU, to the Nova Economics Club. And I'd like to mention this to all the students on this school and outside. And why do you believe that things like Economia Viva make the difference? Because I think in these days, the world needs different students. 30 years ago, I think the world needed students that worked really, really hard, that had good grades, and that would go to companies, do what they learned at school, at university. I think in our days, in our times, we need different types of students, we need different type of young people. And I think there are 4 things that I would highlight that Economia Viva captures that I think define what students today should be about. The first thing is caring, that they actually care about what is happening around them. They actually care about what's going on in the world. They actually care about the issues that are affecting everybody's lives, not just theirs and their families, but everybody's lives. And so they're interested, they care, they understand the world, and they're interested in things that happen in the world. And I think this is very, very important. And that's why every year Economia Viva is a testament to the fact that our students at Nova care. They care not about what they're learning and what they're going to regurgitate, they care about what's happening in the world. The second thing is that after you care, is that you act. Not just that you care and you go home, but you act. And the drive of Nova SU, the drive of Nova Economics Club to put together this amazing panel to actually get this thing organized on top of everything they have to do shows that they can act. They don't just care, but they take that care into action and they translate it into action. And that action is what Economia Viva is about, and so many other things that the different clubs at Nova make happen and Nova SU also supports. We need students that care. We need students that act. We need students that impact. Because it's not just about acting and getting things organizing. It's doing it with quality, with ambition, with great speakers. We're pushing it out to the world. It says from Nova SB to the world. It's trying to push this out so that you actually start creating change. Acting is good. Impacting is better. To create change. And by engaging in this manner, by making sure that it's open to everybody, by making sure that the people come here and it's very high level, you can actually start creating change. And change and action that creates change is impact. And the fourth element that I think is very important for our students today is challenge. Is to understand that whatever you do, you should not assume that you are right, and you should, as much as possible, try to have conversations with people that are from different perspectives, from different walks of life, from different opinions, and it's in this smash of debate that new ideas are going to emerge. And I think Economia Viva has, and will continue to do for the next 7 years at least, have a generation of students at Nova that cares, that acts, that impacts, and that is very open to challenge. And if, honestly, we want to create change in this world, if you want to make this world a little bit more harmonious than it is today, if you want to address the major challenge that this world is facing, we need to train our students to do that, to care, to act, to impact, and to challenge. Going well beyond what happens in the classroom and the exams, and looking at society and trying to take responsibility for the change they can make happen. Because as I always say over and over again, and I'll continue to repeat, the power you have brings with it tremendous responsibility. So congratulations, Enrique. Congratulations, the entire team. Thank you very much for the speakers that are coming in, with the hope that what comes out of here is more influence on new ideas that in the end can create impact and start making the kind of change in the world that we want to see happening. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your words. And now, please welcome to the stage Marcos Pinheira, Head of Future of Cascais Municipality.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us here. It's a pleasure always to be at Nova. So to the Student Union, to the Economics Club, thank you so much for having this event. Dear Dean, thank you so much for welcoming the municipality here every time. And it's wonderful that, first of all, we are here. I know it's a hybrid event, but a lot of us are here. And this is really different from last year, where I actually was doing the opening on behalf of the municipality as well. So this is great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Second, what I would like to say, let me tell you a story. And because of this, because of the fact that we are here, because of this COVID, the pandemic, I feel like telling you what Cascais did because of the pandemic. We acted very fast. We acted decisively. We were able, not me that is saying, but a lot of people say, to have one of the best responses in Portugal to the pandemic. Why? Because we were ready. And we were not ready for a pandemic. We had no idea that a pandemic was coming. Even while we were acting on that response, we had no idea what the pandemic was. But still we were ready. We were ready because we were, for a long time, working data, analyzing data, trying to understand how data can lead us to doing and impacting. And so when something that we did not really know hit us, we were ready to respond. And the world changed a lot in these 2 years, and it will continue to change. It was changing already before the pandemic. I think we were put on hold, and now we go back, hopefully, to these normal times, and the normal is changing, and changing a lot, and changing really fast. We have, right now, a lot of challenges that came from the pandemic. We learn how to work apart, far away. We learn that we can be productive, far away. We learn that we can learn, far away as well. And so this changes a lot of dynamics. We need to rethink everything. But there's also a lot of change that is happening in the world that goes beyond the pandemic. Like one of the issues that are being discussed, like decentralized finance, decentralized organizations, new money or new currency, whatever that is. It might not be money. We are looking at new definitions like metaverse, and that's very important and very impactful in territories like Cascais. And we need to be ready. And we need to be ready for something that we don't really know what it is. And how do we do that? We do that preparing, and we prepare discussing, reflecting, talking to one another, dreaming, understanding, and challenging, and then acting, like Professor Daniel Traça said. And if with that acting we can impact and we can make the world better, that's really certainly a job well done. So thank you so much for doing this. It's so important for Cascais and for the university and for the world. Thank you very, very much, and welcome, and I hope that you have a great, great event. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your words. And now this ceremony is over, and we'll start our panel discussion in a few minutes. Please stay with us.
A school, a community of world citizens dedicated to the development of talent and knowledge that impacts the world. A school of business and economics with a fundamental role to play, supporting those who strive to be better. People, professionals, leaders, driven by insight and enterprise. At our home in Kerkevelus, a top-ranked international school, member of the SEMS Global Alliance, offering innovative and excellent pre-experience programs entirely taught in English. Bachelor's in Economics and Bachelor's in Management for a life-transforming experience with curriculum-enhancing activities and integration of technology advancements and digital ubiquity. Master's in Business Analytics, Economics, Finance, Impact Entrepreneurship and Innovation, International Development and Public Policy, and Management. Ranked by the Financial Times and Ed Universal, with 100% of our graduates working within 6 months of graduation at highly sought sectors and companies. We are widening our horizons. Together, we are a Nova School for the Future.
Não sabe onde poupar, nem onde investir? Na Fidelidade é simples. Com o Fidelidade Savings tem disponíveis várias opções. Escolha a mais adequada para o que pretende alcançar. Tem alguma questão? Fale com a sua agência ou mediador Fidelidade ou vá a fidelidade.pt. Fidelidade, para que a vida não pare.
And now, I would like to ask our panel to come and to start our debate. Os oradores sentam-se os dois ali. Leva o microfone também. Faz favor.
Hello, good afternoon. We will start our first panel of this seventh edition of Viva. And we will start by talking about monetary policy. Our topic is monetary policy and central banking. Is unconventional monetary policy the new conventional? Underlying this question is the idea that we are living in Eurozone, US and other countries with this of monetary stimulus, and removing those stimulus is very difficult and might contribute with some turbulence to the financial markets and to the economies. But as we have been seeing in the recent months, we have some rise in inflation that is complicated even a little bit more this already difficult equation for the central bankers. For the discussion today, we have with us here in Nova, Professor Margarida Abreu from ISEG, University of Lisbon, and also a member of the Board of Auditors, João Amador, which is a professor here in the Nova SBE, and also Deputy Director of the Research Department of Bank of Portugal. And remotely, as you can see in the panel, Vítor Constâncio, former ECB Vice President and also former Governor of Bank of Portugal, and Chiara Osbat, which is the Advisor in Directorate General Economics of ECB. Thank you all for being with us today. We will start with the presentation by Vítor Constâncio, and then we will open the discussion to the panel. Vítor Constâncio, please, the floor is yours. You can, whenever you want. I don't know if we have Vítor Constâncio with us. There's some technical problem, I think.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
I don't understand well what the moderator has been saying. Am I to understand that I should begin the introduction that I was asked to do?
Yes, you can. I was presenting the panel, so you now to your presentation, please.
Oh. Now it says the host has disabled the use of sharing the screen. If I cannot share the screen, then I cannot do my presentation. So please, can you allow me to share the screen? Oh, there it is. There it is. Yeah. So. Of course, by expressing my gratitude for the invitation for this big event organized by students. And the organizers asked me to make a short presentation before the panel itself. And I will participate in the panel, but to do a short introduction about the instruments, frameworks that the ECB has adopted through time to frame the monetary policy that was conducted, and many new so-called non-conventional instruments that had to be devised to face the situations of crisis that we have faced. So I will do that as briefly as possible. I guess everyone knows that the treaty defines for the Euro system a hierarchical mandate, meaning that there is a primary objective, which is price stability, and then a list of general objectives like environment, full employment, financial stability, and others that come after the primary objective is assured. And at the beginning of monetary union in 1999, a strategy framework was adopted with these three elements. There was a quantitative definition of what was price stability, and it was defined at the time as inflation being below 2. It could be 0 or negative, and it would be price stability according to the definition. That created problems later on. And then two pillars. A monetary pillar, which was following the development of a monetary aggregate, M3 in the case of Europe, as a way to see if monetary growth was not excessive, and in the vision that came basically from the Bundesbank could create inflation. It was defined, this growth rate of M3 at 4.5 initially. And then a broad general assessment, the second pillar, based on other economic drivers of inflation, to pass a joint judgment about prospects for inflation. That was the framework. This framework didn't work very well because initially, well, I have to really try. Let me try to see if I really can. Yeah. Do you see now the slide? I know that's not the one. Sorry. That's not the one. Oh my God. This is not this one too. Yeah. So I hope that now you see the full screen with the slide. And as I was saying, the initial framework didn't work too well because if we look to the developments of the economy and inflation and monetary variables, since the beginning of the euro, we see the recessions that we had. We have the inflation. We see how inflation goes down when the economy goes down, not all the time, but there is such a relationship. But what is also clear is that growth of the money aggregate is not very much related with inflation developments, and there is a big disconnect between the two. So much so in the initial period when M3 was growing much above the 4.5%, which was the reference value, and no inflation really emerged. So the framework had to be changed in May of 2003. Instrument interest rate policy here represented by the effect of such policy on the overnight market interest rate, the EONIA initially and now called Esther. And as you see, it became negative after 2014. And these market rate, short term, which then influences other rates, was the reflection mostly of the so-called deposit facility that the ECB and other major central banks offer to the banks. Then when they would have excess liquidity, they could deposit with the central bank and initially getting some interest from that. But in 2008, in the crisis, one of the measures was to allow full allotment of the liquidity of the central bank, whatever the amount that would be demanded by the banks, and that of course led that the market rate became then equal or almost equal to the rate of the deposit facility, which then became to be the policy rate of the ECB. Now, to highlight the messages of these slides, I already said about the disconnect between M3 and inflation, but also what is relevant is that inflation was below 2 during long periods of time, and in particular since 2013 it has been below 2. So that has been, of course, a problem for the ECB. Then we had crisis in 2008-9, recession, another recession which existed only in Europe among developed economies, and then of course COVID much later on. And it was then in 2008 and then in 2014-15 when inflation became negative for a few months, that we had to invent the so-called unconventional policy measures that are in the title of this session. And I signaled there when they appeared. So starting with the revision of the framework in May, responding to the way it was functioning until then, the first element was a redefinition of the target. Instead of being just below 2 and could be 0 or even negative, it became below but close to 2%, which was, of course, a more, in a way, at the time, demanding target. Second, the presentation of monetary policy decisions would start with the economic analysis and not with the monetary analysis that initially was said by the first president of the ECB, that the monetary pillar was much thinner, but now in May 2003, well, the presentation had to begin with the economic analysis. Also, the monetary analysis would serve mainly as a means of cross-checking from medium to long-term perspective the indications coming from the economic analysis, cross-checking. And also the reference value of 4.5, which was to be reviewed and published every year, would not be published anymore. And indeed, it was never published after 2003, and no one has referred to such an indicator after that. So there was a demotion of the monetary pillar, clearly, by these elements. And so, as I said in the speech from which I took these developments and this quote, the monetary pillar became thinner as a result. And in June of the next year, 2004, the ECB started publishing staff macroeconomic projections, which of course made the framework of the ECB much more aligned with the framework of all the major central banks in the world, the so-called flexible inflation targeting. So this was the first development of the monetary framework. Now, the list of unconventional measures that are in the title of this session and that we took since 2008. The first one was in October, the provision of central bank liquidity at demand, whatever the banks needed, with fixed rate, of course, by us, by the ECB. And so, as I explained already, the policy rate became the deposit rate, the deposit facility rate. In 2011, there was a big speculation against a few countries in the periphery, their sovereign debts. After, in 2010, Germany and France started to speak about debt restructuring of Greece, which then negotiations dragged on throughout the whole of 2011, and that led also to speculation against the sovereign debt of Spain and Italy in 2011. And so since 2010-11, we had to start buying from Portugal, from Ireland, from Greece initially, and afterwards from Spain and Italy, which was totally unconventional, kind of policy, although it was foreseen in the treaty that the ECB could indeed buy or sell such securities in the secondary market. The third type of unconventional policy was in 2012 the announcement of a policy, an instrument that was never used so far, which was the possibility of the ECB intervening in buying bonds of a particular country that would be under pressure, but this time this program required conditionality. The country had to take some measures to help adjustment and not just be the beneficiary of the purchases by the ECB. But it's a program that is there. In 2013 came another unconventional policy, forward guidance. In the US, the president of the Fed announced that they were doing already large purchases of securities, and he announced in May that they would start to reduce those purchases much later in the year. But the mere announcement led to a big increase in bond rates, and so for the first time there was contagion, as there is always contagion from what happens in the US markets and European markets and many other world markets. And so the bond yields increased also in Europe. And then we had to introduce this forward guidance by saying that we would not increase rates while the situation would continue and until further notice. So, and this forward guidance was initially very efficient because bond rates in Europe came down after we announced this in July of 2013. Then in 2014, we had a new phase of the big long-term liquidity provision by the ECB, which this time was a pure measure of credit easing because it was called, since then, targeted long-term refinancing operations, which means that they are linked, the provision of big liquidity at lower rates are linked to the behavior of credit supply by each bank. So that was a measure. We also announced purchases of asset-backed securities, and in June of 2014, we lowered the policy interest rate and the deposit facility rate, which became negative. So the policy rate became negative. Finally, in 2015, after the inflation had been negative for a few months, late 14 and beginning of 15, we finally announced, and then implemented large-scale asset purchases, so-called quantitative easing, buying sovereign and corporate bonds and ABSs and all of it. And so this then was stopped to buy new ones in December of 18, and then it was restarted in 19. And then, of course, the COVID crisis led the ECB to create a new program of large purchases, which I will show later on during my panel intervention. Finally, and that's the last slide of this short introduction, finally, last year the ECB adopted a new policy framework because one of the reasons to go for a new framework was that indeed the ECB had not been able during more than 10 years to reach the target of inflation being consistently very close to 2%. So it was felt a new framework was necessary. And the new framework consisted of the following aspects. The medium-term inflation target was redefined again, and it's now a fixed 2% and not just close to 2%. So the new target is more demanding. The target is symmetric in the sense that some deviations from the target are admitted. The symmetric 2% inflation target provides a clear anchor for long-term inflation expectations, and when the economy is close to the lower bound, when interest rates are at 0 or lower, this requires specially forceful monetary policy measures to avoid negative deviations from the inflation target, and this may also imply a transitory period in which inflation is moderately above target. That was new. In practice it existed completely, because that's what happened in some years in the past. I'm not going into that, but to say it officially was new. The flexibility of the medium-term orientation takes into account that deviations have to be interpreted. It's just not a mechanical reaction to those deviations. And then the new strategy also recognized officially that the so-called up to then unconventional instruments would become normal instruments whenever the Governing Council of the ECB would see necessary. And that ends the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before
now
opening the discussion.
Get out of the capture in the screen,
okay.
And then I will use it again when my time to speak during the panel will arrive. Thank you.
Let me just make one question before opening the discussion to our panel. That this new target, this revision that was put in place last year of 2% fixed is more demanding. Why do you say that? Considering that now ECB is allowed to have inflation above and below this target, and not only below. Probably is not listening. Okay. Okay, let's open this discussion to the panel. And I will start with this idea that I was trying to put to Vítor Constâncio, but we have some problems with the sound. I will start with Margarida Abreu. We heard Vítor Constâncio saying that this strategy review that ECB put in place last year, which is this idea that 2% is now a fixed target and not that old idea of below but close to 2%. And he said that he considers a more demanding target. Do you agree with this idea, or ECB has now more flexibility to have inflation below and above 2%?
Do I have sound? Yes. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here. That's a pleasure. And I'm not sure I'm going to reach the high expectation having heard the initial speech of this session, but I will try to add something to the discussion, although I hate to discuss in English. And going to your question, I think this new target for inflation, which is a medium-term target, gives more flexibility. Now that we are far from this objective, because far and with in a certain environment. Let me explain myself. We are now, and for a few years, with interest rates close or at their effective lower bound. That means that moving in interest rates or further reduction in interest rate won't give any additional aggregate demand or doesn't push aggregate demand. So the instruments of monetary policy are the unconventional instruments of monetary policy. And going more to your question, I think the advantage of having and center expectations on 2% and not between or below 2% but close to 2% is to say to people and to the market that for the central bank it's equally bad to have inflations above or below this target. But I don't think it's more difficult or more easy, this target, than another. It's better and it gives flexibility to monetary policy and clarifies the objective of monetary policy.
This review was decided in the first semester of last year before the rise in the inflation rates. Do you think that these new inflation rates, these higher inflation rates in Eurozone, are some kind of game changer in policy, monetary policy?
I think the rise in the inflation rate should make us rethink our monetary policy stance. But we can move very quickly to a tightened monetary policy because there are many risks we have to address, and so I think it's much better to have a slow path. Of course, we have to handle this problem, but we are still thinking about what are the drivers of this inflation we are having now, and we know that they are related by energy prices. We know the supply chains and bottlenecks in supply chains are contributing to this inflation rate. But since this is going, this inflation is above our objective already for a few months, we have to consider this problem. but this mustn't make us or make ECB and the Euro system move very quickly and, of course, abandon all the other measures that are in place. And I don't know if you want me to continue, but we have to take care to many risks of the transition to another monetary policy stance.
We'll go back to that point later. Let me just ask to João Bador, picking this idea of this new target of ECB to fix 2%. Is it better to ECB to deal today with this inflation threat, or is the same, or not having the strategy review?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. If you allow me just a couple of seconds to thank the organizers for the invitation. It's always very nice to be here. Also to compliment the organization for this courage of organizing these events in the contexts that are hard. We are having technical difficulties, but I mean, we should be pushing to organize things anyway and going forward. So congratulations for the initiative. So again, happy to be here. Now trying to be kind of short and trying to answer your question on the target and on the 2% and how hard it is, and on how much should we worry about it. I think that we can have these two types of interpretation. So I guess we could say that the 2% is more demanding in the sense that you are now you are actually pinpointing a value. So you're not just saying 2 or below. So you initially would give an interval. Now you are pinpointing a number. So in this sense, you say it's more demanding. But you can also see it in another way, because now you allow this inflation to be higher than 2%. So this is something that now gives you some extra flexibility. So you can take it in both ways. And taking your point, I mean, it was kind of really timely. The revision of the strategy was timely in the sense that it made it kind of normal that now we can kind of accommodate a situation where our inflation rate stays above 2% for some time. This kind of change in strategy was also taking place in the US. I think the strategy in Europe was kind of managed I would say in a better way. It was kind of clear what came out. But I would say it was a timely change. Now it's good for us to have this extra flexibility of being able to be above 2% for some time. I mean, we are not taking this kind of makeup. We are not compensating. This is not the idea of compensating lower inflations lower than 2% previously. We are just now saying that we have a larger range and we can live comfortably above 2% for some time. So that is good. We could also say that the target is demanding because we were for such a long time below 2 that people would say the ECB finds it difficult to get to 2. So now if you set the point at 2, you would say it's demanding to be there. But the circumstances now, I mean, they have changed, so we are now concerned with being above 2 and not below 2. So again, there are different ways we can look at it. How worried should we be? I mean, this will be a long discussion, but let me just try to summarize it. I mean, my view, and I should have said this up front, these are my views. I'm not representing Bank of Portugal here, so I have this disclaimer. My views are not necessarily those of the bank or the Euro system, so I'm just kind of taking my hat of economics professor here at Nova. I mean, when you think about inflation, I mean, the way we usually think is just we try to split these developments along trend, volatility, and cycle. So it's a kind of conceptual way of looking at what is going on. These things sometimes get a bit mixed up. So if you have volatility for a long time, this translates into trend. So this frontier between trend, cycle, and volatility, it's not easy to establish always. But if we go one by one, we would say, as far as trend is concerned, I mean, generally people are still quite comfortable. So the numbers that come out of our models say that in Europe, the trend inflation stays below 2%, around 1.7, something like that. So there shouldn't be much of a concern in terms of the trend drivers for inflation. Things like the way the labor market institutions work, the way expectations are formed, the aging of the population, these things basically could be kind of helping inflation to stay under control in the long run around this 2%. Some things may not work so well, so competition may not be as strong as it was in the past, international trade, these other trends may be kind of not helping our long-term inflation anyway. So trend should be okay. Volatility, we know we have a lot of volatility now, so most of what we are seeing now comes from volatility in energy markets and some agricultural products, some supply chain disruptions. These things are volatility in the sense that monetary policy shouldn't be responding strongly to volatility. It wouldn't be wise to do it. Regarding the cycle, the third element, the cycle is quite difficult. It's probably the hardest one, because the cycle is basically what the monetary policy should be responding to. So if you pick these three, you would say monetary policy should be in some way tracking the cycle and trying to smooth the cycles. Some people might disagree. Some people might say that cycles are good and not bad. That's acceptable also. But regarding the cycle, we have a difficulty now because we've had the pandemics and it's hard to know where is our potential output. So if we don't know where is our potential output, it's difficult to assess if we are above or below. So we have a positive or negative output gap, and this makes it hard for us to assess where we are in terms of the cycle and what should the monetary policy be doing in this kind of context. So this is how I read. Be relatively optimistic going forward regarding the behavior of inflation, but of course there's some degree of uncertainty if this volatility keeps going, and if we mismeasure the cycle, we can have these repeated surprises, kind of upward surprises on inflation, and these things can fuel into labor market expectations, and then it would be worse. But I would say moderately optimistic regarding inflation going forward.
Let me just ask you to clarify if I understand well your words. You think that if ECB does the strategy last year, it would be very much pressed today to increase rates right now, or to take other measures right at the end of the quantitative easing, for example?
I think it would be a bit harder to explain. I mean, we've had the strategy being revised, and the strategy was basically responding to structural change that took place and that were making it easier to decrease interest rates because they were at the zero lower bound. So the initial motive for revision the strategy was not anticipation of inflation. There are many things that are out there which make full sense, even without inflation. But the fact that we've had this strategy, putting this number now at 2 and allowing these symmetric deviations above and below, makes it easier to communicate to markets, and I would say we should go beyond communicating to markets, we should go into communicating with people, that being above 2% for some time should not be a problem. And this also, basically, we could see it may strengthen the credibility of the central bank, and it may, in some way, help manage expectations. It may signal and may put the central bank in a situation where it is not pressured to act too fast and too abruptly if inflation stays above 2 for a couple of quarters. So, yeah, I would say my answer to you is this was a timely and useful revision in the strategy.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you can talk with Chiara Ojbat. I don't know if she is listening to us. Not sure, probably not. Ok, vamos com... Chiara? Are you listening?
But I'm able to listen through the live stream. I've heard my name.
Okay. I was trying to contact you to make a question. We were talking about this
Yes,
idea that this
it
new
seems that I'm online now.
this new target of the fixed 2%. What your opinion on this? Is this more demanding, or is it simultaneously more flexible to manage in this moment when the inflation is above 2%?
Okay, thank you for the question. So first of all, I would like, if you allow me, I would like to thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. And I was just thinking that 7th February 1992 was when Maastricht Treaty was signed. So we're also celebrating 30 years of so, sorry, I have a little bit of an issue that I can only hear myself a minute after I speak. And I don't know if you will interact me because I have to stop the live stream in order to speak. So I was saying thank you for inviting me, and it's the 30th year anniversary of the Maastricht Treaty, which basically is what brought us here together today, speaking about ECB, monetary policy, inflation in the euro area. And also, like João before me, I have to say that I'm here as a private citizen, so everything I say is not the ECB speaking, but it's just me. That said, you asked if the target, the new symmetric target, is more demanding. It is more demanding. Demanding is the adjective that Professor Constâncio used earlier. No? It is more demanding because we have more than 10 years behind us where we couldn't reach the 2% target. But at the same time, it's easier to understand what brought us in the strategy review to decide on changing the formulation of the target, which, as we saw before, had a history below 2%, below but close to 2%, at 2%, with equal tolerance, or rather equal intolerance for not meeting it from below and not meeting it from above. We think this is easier to understand. It clearly orientates expectations of agents being households, it being firms and financial markets, and we can gauge this via the information we get, from example, from the survey of professional forecasters that we run quarterly, in which we were monitoring what do they understand as close but below to 2%. And this was not very clear. Do they understand that we want inflation to be symmetrically around 1.9, other numbers, or did they understand it really asymmetrically in terms of no overshoot of 2% would ever be tolerated, but an undershoot could be tolerated. So there was a lot of ambiguity in that double key kind of target, and we think that yes, it looked more demanding to reach it because we hadn't been able to reach 2% for a long time, but at the same time, it's a simpler target to understand. So I'm afraid I don't hear your feedback, so I will mute myself
I
for a
have
moment and listen. on the
another
other
question about, if you're listening to me, about inflation. How do you see this current rise in inflation rates? Do you think this is mainly a supply side problem, or we are facing already in Europe or Eurozone some demand problems too, some demand pressures?
So that is not working for me. Unfortunately, I cannot hear you. If the organizers could either unmute the room or type in the chat, but the double channel is not working. I'm very sorry about this.
I have some problems with this. They're trying to solve. Let me, Vítor, Constâncio. Probably not to.